I think it's important to hear from Marine Le Pen. This is her victory speech last night because she's changing her language very much of the party that she took over and the party of her father. Let's take a listen.
French people must seize this historical opportunity that has opened to them because what is at stake in this election is savage globalization, which jeopardizes our civilization. French people have a simple choice. Either we continue on the path of total deregulation without borders and without protection, and as consequences, the relocation of jobs, unfair international competition, mass immigration, and free movement of terrorists. This reign is a reign where money is king, where you choose France, borders that protect our jobs, our purchasing power, our security, our national identity.
Ansgar, that sounds like France first.
Sounds like France first, and there are very huge similarities to the situation in the United States, the globalists versus the patriots, and that was the same battle here between the Clinton globalists and the Trump patriots. Nevertheless, I stay my ground that she can't make it in the decisive election in May. But it's very important to see. There is this electorate. There are a lot of people who are supporting her, and the French establishment would be bad advised to ignore it. They have to deal with it. Like in the United States, it came from the top since Trump became the president. And in France, they have to look for the future. I think Mr. Macron or Monsieur Macron will win this election. I'm sure he will, but I'm not sure whether he will be successful in transforming the desolate, Mr. Trump would say, the disaster of the French economy and the French state. And that will be his duty for the next upcoming 5 years.
Erin, I want to bring you back in. It wasn't so long ago that not so far from Paris in Davos, Chinese President Xi Jinping talked about globalization being the only way, and without naming any names, he really sort of threw down the mantle to the economic nationalists. What do you think about how the world is reacting to this vote? OK, we're going into the second round in 2 weeks. It looks like Macron's ahead in the polls. Are there any leaders, apart from perhaps Vladimir Putin in Russia, who would see a Le Pen, and Trump here, who would see a Le Pen victory as something that was good internationally?
I don't think so. I mean, so far, Putin is definitely, he's pretty much endorsed her quite blatantly by receiving her in Moscow. What's interesting about this election is that I think the whole world will be watching, because it's not just about the future of France. It's a referendum on the EU in many ways, because we have two candidates with such diametrically opposed views to the EU and globalization in general. We have the completely different mindsets and different philosophies and different political platforms. And so whoever wins, it's going to have a ripple effect, not just on the EU, but the global economy and throughout the world. So everyone is definitely watching this very closely.
I'm glad you foreshadowed my next question, because I was going to go to Remi on this. You know, the EU, even if Macron wins, it still has the same problems, right? We've got Brexit being negotiated after a British election, where Theresa May is expected to be stronger. What are going to be the effects, even if Macron wins? Europe really is still in crisis, correct?
Well, the key question is being able to show how the European Union is in favor of the national people of France and other countries. We tend to forget the reason why the European Union was established is to prevent war and be able to try to have some kind of a global economic development on the continent. We tend to always, use the European Union as a scapegoat for our own shortcomings in different countries. But if you actually look at the effectiveness of the European Union, there's a series of objectives that have been filled, and that's the key element for Macron in between the first and the second round, is to be able to show this. Marine Le Pen is trying to picture Macron as one of those global forces that will be in favor of high finance and against the French people, while Macron has to show that it's actually in the best interest of the most disfavored people in France not to get out of the EU, go back to the French franc that would look at a huge devaluation of the currency and would kill all the savings of the senior citizens. But he has to make that case. And we've seen in the speech yesterday night that all his speech which was about patriotism, being able to show that Macron and being in part of the EU is reinforcing the French patriotism against the nationalistic view of the 1930s of Marine Le Pen. While she's trying to show him as a banker, the truth is his mother was a nurse, his father was a scholar in a provincial university, while Marine Le Pen is the one that inherited from a fortune for her father and is coming from the establishment and the very wealthy circles.
And also a member of the European Parliament, which is Ansgar, you know, Germany, France established the European Union. It started with coal and steel, and now we have a huge social product. Some people have corrected that. What does this debate in France show us the way forward or backwards when it comes to the EU?
In Germany, I think there is still a strong belief. It eroded a little bit over the last few years, but there's still a strong belief in the future of the European Union.
But the British always said that the EU was a German club. How, you know,
and since
France is the junior partner.
And since they said it, I'm not totally convinced that only Putin and only maybe Trump would welcome a victory of Marine Le Pen. From the London point of view, they could be quite happy if the rest of the European Union would fall apart.
But what about countries like Poland? What about countries like Hungary? What about countries that have really deep-seated problems ideologically with the way Europe has been going?
They are very skeptical in regard to the old established Western Europe, and I think therefore the new Europe has to be more integrating in regard to giving more sovereignty to the single to the national states, but just to keep the bright and the great ideas, but not to interfere with all the topics of the different states. I think, therefore, we have to have a more integrated in the big issues. How do we position Europe in regard to Russia or to the United States? But we don't have to interfere with all those domestic problems in the national states in Europe.
Like trying to ban the British sausage and chocolate and all those fake news stories that used to be around.
For example.
Yeah, exactly, fake news. I want to get serious with Erin. There was a terror attack or attempted terror attack just, you know, hours really before the election. What does this vote suggest about the effect of terrorism on people's voting habits in Europe? Donald Trump even weighed in and said, oh, this is going to have a big effect via Twitter. What do you feel on the ground there, Erin?
Well, Donald Trump always says that anytime there's a terror attack in France, sort of, oh, well, here it goes again, this is because, you know. And Marine Le Pen and the Front National, they usually take the opportunity during such attacks to emphasize their platform. This is what happens when you let, you know, all those immigrants into the country. This is what happens when people don't integrate. This is what happens when you have a president who can't keep you safe. I attended one of Le Pen's rallies a couple weeks ago, and that was a point she kept reiterating, that I will protect you, that France is under threat, and other presidents and other governments have failed to protect you, but my party, we will protect you. And I think some people who are afraid could be swayed by that.
Yeah, so what was your feeling about how terror, the acts, and also how the politicians described it affected this election, and also going into the second round?
François Hollande did everything he could do to actually implement drastic security measures. We have mass surveillance. We have the raids of the police without going before a judge. We have identity politics to actually exclude further communities. And this attack did not profit to François Fillon and barely to Marine Le Pen. So right now, we have to go back to what, for example, our domestic intelligence is calling for, is a new strategy acting upstream instead of stigmatizing minorities. Terrorism is a French problem and not a foreign one, and France has to deal with it. A society that breeds its own monsters can't expel them abroad and call it a day.
Very passionate indeed. Final word, Ansgar, here in the studio. We've got the German elections coming up. What does the French election, and what you've seen so far, harbinger for Germany and the rest of Europe?
I think in the end, we will see a right-wing party in Germany on the rise. It will be stronger than it has been since the founding of the Bundesrepublik Deutschland in 1949, but I think it will get 10, 12, maybe 15%. But in the end, the two established parties, CDU and the Social Democrats, will lead the country for the next years. But also they have to deal with the big changes in Europe, and they have to take the fears of the people seriously.
To be continued in 2 weeks. We hope to have you all back. Ansgar here in the studio. Thanks so much. Erin and Yasser also in Paris. Thank you. And Remi in Miami.